Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. West Asia war worsens. 3 US fighter jets downed in friendly fire over Kuwait. Israel kills at least 31 Hezbollah militants, and Iran's projectiles shut down biggest Saudi oil refinery and an Amazon data center in the UAE. Oil surges over 8%, as does gas. Gold rises by 2%. Dollar also strengthens against most currencies. Global markets bleed, with India's BSE Sensex settling nearly 1,050 points lower. The Nifty is also below 24,900. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral talks with his Canadian counterpart Mark Carney in New Delhi. Pacts on critical minerals, uranium signed, goal set to ink trade pact by the end of 2026. In the wake of the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East or West Asia, Prime Minister Narendra Modi held important telephonic conversations today. The Prime Minister spoke to the King of Bahrain, King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa. And the Prime Minister also spoke to the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Prime Minister had condemned the attacks on both these countries and discussed the well-being of the Indian community in both countries. And Amritpal Singh has been tracking that story closely. He joins us now from the newsroom. Amrit, what more can you tell us about the Prime Minister's phone call with the Oman King as well as the Saudi Prime Minister?
Bahrain King.
It's Bahrain, yes, Bahrain.
Mark, essentially, as you know, these countries have been bearing the brunt of attacks from Israel. There is a sizable Indian diaspora living in these countries, so the Prime Minister understandably is concerned about their safety, and also he brought up the issue of how it could lead to regional instability and how this war has the potential of turning into a full-scale regional conflict, which is not in the interest of anybody. It's not in the interest of world peace. So the Prime Minister has been, the Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has been speaking to his counterparts from the Gulf countries. The Prime Minister today, spoke with these two leaders and expressed concern, and he condemned the attacks being launched into their countries and how this does not augur well for world peace and regional stability, and also the resultant disruptions in supply chains that could happen because of this conflict. India has been consistently maintaining right from the beginning that all sides involved in this conflict should exercise maximum restraint and should look at de-escalating the situation through dialogue and diplomacy. Mark.
Right, indeed. And if we look at the Indian community, put this into context for us, in the entire Gulf region, there are about, close to 10 million people living of Indian origin. A vast majority of them are in Saudi Arabia and in the UAE. In the context of what is currently happening, what advisories have been issued to the Indian community?
Well, the Indian community has been asked to stay vigilant in these countries, not go near military sites, avoid all non-essential travel, and the embassies, our embassies and missions in these countries have put out helpline, 24/7 helpline numbers that in the event of any eventuality or people being in distress can contact the embassy, but they've been told to remain vigilant, stay indoors, stay away from military sites, because essentially most of the targets have been either the military installations of the US in these countries, or US assets. So they've been asked to follow the security protocols being issued by the local authorities and keep themselves safe, Mark.
Indeed, and apart from that, about remaining safe, what can the Indian community do at a time like this? When the country, many people will be wondering about the situation as it evolves. To what extent can they be participants?
Okay.
In yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the Indian community can do what the rest of the world community can do. They can stay safe. They can stay at homes. They can stay away from sites, military sites, as the advisory has been saying. They can be in touch with each other. Look at possible places, where they can either go into bunkers or shelters where they can be protected in the event of mass-scale missile attacks. This is very common in, say, Israel since the conflict broke out with the Hamas. So they can go to shelters, they can go to underground parking lots, etc. So that's what the local authorities issue advisories. They sound out sirens. So when in such situations, when sirens are sounded out at night, blackouts are imposed. They go into underground shelters, etc., and follow protocols that the local authorities ask them to follow, Mark.
Right. Thanks, Amrit, for staying with us for the moment. But we are going to go now. Breaking news coming in. Prime Minister Modi has also spoken.
Donald J. Trump, the Department of War launched Operation Epic Fury, the most lethal, most complex, and most precise aerial operation in history. For 47 long years, the expansionist and Islamist regime in Tehran has waged a savage, one-sided war against America. They didn't always declare it openly, except for their constant chants of death to America. They did it through the blood of our people. Car bombs in Beirut, rocket attacks on our ships, murders at our embassies, roadside bombs in Iraq and Afghanistan, funded and armed by Iranian Quds Force and IRGC killers. My generation of veterans carry the names of brothers who never came home. Brothers butchered by Iranian-backed roadside bombs and well-armed militias, thousands of our own. We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. Their war on Americans has become our retribution against their Ayatollah and his death cult. It took the 47th president, a fighter who always puts America first, to finally draw the line after 47 years of Iranian belligerence. He reminded the world, as he has time and time again, being an American means something unbreakable. If you kill Americans, if you threaten Americans anywhere on earth, we will hunt you down without apology and without hesitation, and we will kill you. President Trump has also been very consistent. Crazy regimes like Iran, hell-bent on prophetic Islamist delusions, cannot have nuclear weapons. It's common sense. Many have said it, but it takes guts to actually enforce it, and our president has guts. Iran's stubborn and self-evident nuclear pursuits, their targeting of global shipping lanes, and their swelling arsenal of ballistic missiles and killer drones are no longer tolerable risks. Iran was building powerful missiles and drones to create a conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Let me say that again. A conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Our bases, our people, our allies, all in their crosshairs. Iran had a conventional gun to our head as they tried to lie their way to a nuclear bomb. It almost worked under Obama and his terrible deal, but not under this president. Turns out the regime who chanted death to America and death to Israel was gifted death from America and death from Israel. This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change, and the world is better off for it. Today, in their desperation, the enemy is unmasked, as Iranian missiles and drones rain down indiscriminately on the hotels, airports, apartments, and other civilian targets of their neighbors. Cowardly terrorist tactics from a regime that for decades has trafficked in cowardly terrorist tactics, lies, death, and destruction to this day. The Iranian leadership has built nothing except proxies and missiles and drones and deeply buried nuclear factories and facilities. Peaceful nuclear ambitions do not need to be buried underneath mountains. Last June, Operation Midnight Hammer obliterated their nuclear program to rubble. Afterward, we told them plainly, that's it, now make a deal. They arrogantly refused. We said, rebuild it, and we'll stop you again, this time far worse. Well, President Trump, Secretary Rubio, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, they bent over backwards for real diplomacy, offering pathway after pathway to peace. I watched it. I was there. They tried over and over and over again earnest attempts at peace. The former regime had every chance to make a peaceful and sensible deal. But Tehran was not negotiating. They were stalling, buying time to reload their missile stockpiles and restart their nuclear ambitions. Their goal, hold us hostage, threatening to strike our forces. Well, President Trump doesn't play those games. And as Secretary Rubio said after the Maduro raid, if you don't know, now you know. President Trump puts America and Americans first. He doesn't hesitate, and neither do our troops. The mission of Operation Epic Fury is laser-focused. Destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production, destroy their navy and other security infrastructure, and they will never have nuclear weapons. We're hitting them surgically, overwhelmingly, and unapologetically. With every passing day, our capabilities get stronger and Iran's get weaker. We set the terms of this war, from start to finish. Our ambitions are not utopian. They are realistic, scoped to our interests and the defense of our people and our allies. Speaking of people, we hope the Iranian people take advantage of this incredible opportunity. President Trump has been clear, now is your time. To Iranian security forces, choose wisely. President Trump has also been clear about your fate in either direction. To the media outlets and political left screaming endless wars, stop. This is not Iraq. This is not endless. I was there for both. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. He called the last 20 years of nation-building wars dumb, and he's right. This is the opposite. This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission. Destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes. Israel has clear missions as well, for which we are grateful. Capable partners, as we've said since the beginning, capable partners are good partners. Unlike so many of our traditional allies who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, hemming and hawing about the use of force. America, regardless of what so-called international institutions say, is unleashing the most lethal and precise air power campaign in history. B-2s, fighters, drones, missiles, and of course, classified effects. All on our terms, with maximum authorities. No stupid rules of engagement, no nation-building quagmire, no democracy-building exercise, no politically correct wars. We fight to win, and we don't waste time or lives. As the president warned, an effort of this scope will include casualties. War is hell, and always will be. A grateful nation honors the 4 Americans we have lost thus far and those injured. The absolute best of America. May we prosecute the remainder of this operation in a manner that honors them. No apologies, no hesitation, epic fury for them and the thousands of Americans before them taken too soon by Iranian radicals. Before I turn it over to General Kane for the operational update, let me speak straight to you, the Joint Force, our warriors on the front lines. This is your moment. This is the generational turning point America has waited for since 1979, and since the rudderless wars of hubris my generation, our generation, endured. Don't listen to the noise. Just stay focused. Our commander-in-chief is steady at the wheel. We face a determined enemy, but you are better. But we must prove it every single day. History doesn't care if we're tired, if we're scared, or if the fight feels big. It demands warriors who rise anyway. Peace through strength, the warrior ethos, lethality, unity of purpose, those are not slogans. They're the beating heart of what it means to wear the uniform, that uniform. You think clearly under fire, you act decisively in chaos, you uphold the Constitution, and you uphold our country without hesitation. We are not defenders anymore. We are warriors, trained to kill the enemy and break their will. History is watching. Be the force you swore an oath to be, focused, disciplined, lethal, and unbreakable. We will finish this on America First conditions of President Trump's choosing. Nobody else's, as it should be. And know this above all, President Trump and I have your back, always. Through fire, through criticism, through fake news, through everything. We unleash you because you are the best, most powerful, most lethal fighting force the world has ever seen. May Almighty God watch over you and his providential arms of protection extend over you. Godspeed, warriors, and keep going. General Kane, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and good morning, everyone. The purpose of my portion of the briefing today is
Right, so we were listening to the U.S. Secretary of War, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and he was talking about the purposes of this military operation that are taking place in Iran, and he says that it is basically to destroy the infrastructure and the capability of Iran of building missiles and also their nuclear capacities. They are laser focused in doing that. And they have talked about death to America and death to Israel, but it has turned around to be death from America and death from Israel. Joining us to throw light on this and the larger context of this conflict, we have Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, former senior diplomat. Ambassador Sajanar, first of all, how would you, analyze the statements of the U.S. Secretary of War?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mark, for having me on the show. I think there was nothing very new or unusual that we heard from Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. You know, this is the claim, this is the charge that the United States and Mr. Trump himself have been laying for a long time, that there are capabilities, number one, as far as Iran is concerned. You know, it's not only the nuclear enrichment facility, but it is also in terms of missiles. It's also in terms of the, the access, all these proxy units, Hamas, Hezbollah, etc. And they are a threat to regional stability. They are a threat to the U.S. security. And also it has been named that these were preemptive strikes because otherwise there was an imminent threat of strikes being launched against the United States. This is exactly what Pete Hegseth has said. So I think basically reaching out to the world, reaching out to the global community, that what they have done is very justified, and also expressing confidence that they are certain that they are going to win this conflict.
We also have our correspondent Amritpal Singh, who's been following events closely. He's joining us from the newsroom. Amrit, put into context what Pete Hegseth said. Also, with regard to the retaliation that Iran has mounted, he's called it terrorism. The attacks on several Gulf capitals. What do you? This is what we were talking about before we went into the press conference, and how Prime Minister Modi was concerned about the Indian community there.
Well, okay, about what Pete Hegseth said. I think Pete Hegseth was trying to address both the international community and his domestic audience as well. If you look at the content of what he says we'll finish this war on our own terms. He accused Iran of indulging in terrorism. He said the war has a clear objective. The war they want to destroy the missile capabilities. They don't want any nuclear pursuits. Nuclear arsenal in Iran. They want to destroy the Iranian navy, and he said the war will finish once the objective is achieved. He accused the Iranian regime of not doing anything for their people. In fact, like Trump has done before, he called on the Iranian people to, what he said, take advantage of the situation. He had a message for the security forces in Iran saying choose wisely, essentially asking them to revolt. He said and the rest of the rhetoric, right, I think was addressed, he was addressing his domestic constituency. Sure. Given that 4 American soldiers have been killed, and there could be other body bags. He said, well, in war is hell. There could be casualties in war. We respect our foreign soldiers. We honor our foreign soldiers. But this is part of the game. War will have casualties, and we are trying, that President Trump is trying to bring a decisive end to what he called the Iranian regime's terrorism. And he said that, they were negotiating with Iran, while Iran wasn't negotiating. It was stalling the negotiations. It was playing games, and they thought it was time no longer to play games and go in for a military strike. So Pete Hegseth trying to justify the American strike on Iran, and understandably and expectedly accusing Iran of being the aggressor in this case, and also taking on the American media, saying stop fake news. He says those who are criticizing us, remember this is the midterm elections are not very far away, and the popularity of the American president is down. So I think this whole press conference or the media address by Pete Hegseth was both a message to the world, to the Iranians, and also to his domestic audience.
Yes, Amrit, let's turn to Ambassador Sajjanar once again. Ambassador Sajjanar, Pete Hegseth was telling the Iranian people that, there's an opportunity for them to, choose wisely and to act wisely at this current time. What do you think? I mean, there are, of course, lots of opinions from Iranians who are living abroad, who seem to support the US's position. But from within, we don't see too many of those voices.
No, you're very right, Mark. What possibly might have been expected, that there would be an upsurge of support for the invasion, for the attack that has come from outside, from the United States and Israel, that there would be an upsurge, and people would say that the foreign troops who are the invaders, they would be welcomed with flowers and chocolates and all that. That has not happened. We have seen that, there is a pall of gloom that has shrouded and that has enveloped the people, those who have come out on streets in large numbers, to mourn the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and his family and all the others who have perished in these strikes. But of course, there are pockets where people have also got together to celebrate, because I think this it is definitely a recognition that this regime was not popular. Ali Khamenei was not popular. There was a lot of oppression in terms of human rights, huge violation of human rights, of women's rights. We know the case of Mahsa Amini and how women in thousands and tens of thousands had come out on the streets just about 4 years ago in 2022, that they were protesting against all the policies of the government. And then it is not far away that on 28th of December, we saw all these people who had come out on the streets protesting, basically from the bazaar, the bazaris, those who
Okay.
were traders. And because they were feeling the pinch of the sanctions, they were feeling also the pinch of the downturn as far as the economy is concerned, as far as the economic conditions are concerned, the value of the Iranian currency, the real, that had depreciated very heavily. There is huge inflation, there is huge unemployment. I have been there recently and I have witnessed for myself that the shelves in the very many of the
Shops.
supermarkets,
Right.
departmental stores, those are empty. There is huge corruption. So, there is a great
Resentment,
deal
yes.
of unhappiness amongst the people. But they have not come out on the streets in such large numbers so far. At least, they have been swarmed by the people who have come out condoling the death and, yeah, grieving over the death of the Ayatollah.
Indeed. Amrit, if we look, we are calling this war clouds over West Asia, and we see that the U.S. Has a presence in West Asia, in all these Gulf countries, with bases there, and growing U.S. presence. To what extent does it, affect the calculus, in a sense, of both Israel as well as Iran?
Well, the U.S. Presence in the Gulf, the U.S. assets in the Gulf, the Iranians are no match to it, militarily speaking. But what happens is it destabilizes the situation. If Israel says Iran is an existential threat to them, for Iran, the presence of the American military in the Gulf, in their own backyard, is an existential. Iran sees them as an existential threat to them. So it does, bring in conflict, the very presence and the military build-up. The very fact that the Americans and the Israelis chose to attack Iran when the negotiations were on, even though indirect, between the United States and Iran, it clearly looks like, and they went on to kill the supreme leader. This surely has, upset the calculus of peace there, and has clearly put it on the tensions on the escalatory ladder, Mark.
Indeed,
Now, as Ambassador Sajanar was saying, the Americans were expecting that if they take out the supreme leader, no doubt the regime is unpopular in Iran. But if you kill the supreme leader in a way he was killed along with his family in the month of Ramzan, they've made him a martyr out of him. So the people, they put aside their anger against the corruption, against the hardships because of the sanctions, the attitude of the Iranians to sort of not give in to the American and international pressure to stop their missile program or even their nuclear ambitions. Clearly, but the people have rallied behind the regime in this hour because it's not acceptable to them that a foreign power unseats their regime. So in that sense, the American military intervention, at least as of now, doesn't seem to be proving working on that sense. In fact, it's proving counterproductive as far as the people's sentiment goes, Mark.
Okay, Ambassador Sajanhar, the U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth talked about being laser focused and the manner in which they are dismantling the infrastructure of the military infrastructure, or which can sort of work towards threatening the United States. It talked about missiles and nuclear facilities, but they've also, with the help of Israel, been also targeting the proxies that Iran put up. And we've seen that their leadership also was hit over the last few years. To what extent, has Iran's proxies, are they in a position to even participate in Iran's defense at this current time?
Yeah, so two questions, Mark, that you posed. One is in terms of the laser focus that they have. Of course, we need to see that whenever a war takes place, the results and the manner in which it evolves is quite, there are huge imponderables as far as that is concerned. So, while the United States and Israel might have that laser focus, but then we see that whatever is happening in the Middle East, in West Asia, and the Gulf countries, For instance, the attack by Iran on these countries, on Bahrain, on Kuwait, on Oman, which has been negotiating, which has been mediating, on the United Arab Emirates. I don't know whether anyone really expected that, because the attacks could have gone on to the American assets there, but firing missiles and drones on ordinary sort of commercial buildings and residential buildings and huge infrastructure projects, for instance, hitting Aramco. I don't think anyone really expected that. These are imponderables, and what Iran might have thought that by doing this, they will be able to motivate these countries to put pressure on the United States to stop the conflict. I think it's going to have an exactly the opposite result, because the improving relations between countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, UAE and Iran, I think Iran has been successful in making them, drawing a gulf between them and making enemies of these countries. So, then one has to deal with all these particular issues. So it is, in my view, Iran has really been acting out of desperation. It is a panic reaction to what it is doing as far as the Gulf is concerned, and it has truly shot itself in the foot. The second part, you asked, Mark, in terms of dealing with the proxies that are being set up around Israel by Iran. Many of them, for instance, Hamas, has been very significantly degraded as a result of the war that the conflict that started on 7th of October 2023. Similar is the case with Hezbollah. You know that the whole thing started when the Hamas attacked Israel, and then Hezbollah also came into the picture, and the Houthis also came into the picture. Over the last 2.5 years, their capacity to really take on Israel, I think, has come down very significantly. That, as I said, has been decimated to a very significant extent. So, in fact, I don't think they're a match for Israel at the moment. But I think Israel also should not be taking its eyes off what its real targets are. Otherwise, the effectiveness of their campaign, US-Israel campaign against Iran, the intensity of that could get diminished.
So indeed, so Amrit, of course, general commentators would look to see whether this is spiraling out of control, developing into World War III and the like. But we've seen that also with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. To what extent do you see that Iran has had diplomatic support from China and Russia? And of course, China and Russia are not going to be obviously direct participants in this conflict.
That remains to be seen, but right now China and Russia have offered support in terms of making statements and extending diplomatic support by calling the UN Security Council sessions, etc. But beyond that, I don't think it doesn't look as if now that they are interested to jump into the war. Russia has its own set of, it has its own war to fight. China has its own calculus to do with the United States in terms of trade, tariffs, etc. So I don't think it doesn't look as if now that Russia and China would want to become direct participants in this conflict. Apart from offering diplomatic support in terms of making statements and showing vocalizing solidarity and asking the Americans to stop hitting Iran. But beyond that, I don't think they would jump in. The real threat, as the ambassador was saying, is it turning into a sectarian conflict. If it becomes a Shia-Sunni fight, which Iran is foolishly attacking, civilian targets, apartments and buildings, etc., even if there are American assets there in terms of non-military assets or their offices or their businesses, clearly the Gulf countries are seeing this as attack on a violation of their sovereignty. They would be okay perhaps if it was limited only to military targets or military bases of the United States, though Iran also has an argument there saying that these countries are providing their lands to the US military And Abbas Araghchi said that we are not trying to hit our brothers, we are not against our brothers, we are only trying to hit the American assets there. But, buildings, etc., malls, when they are attacked and when civilians start dying, there were the deaths in UAE, there were deaths in Kuwait. So obviously those countries would want to react. They've been right now only vocalizing their reaction. But the real threat is that if they become participants in this war, in any case, there is no parity, military parity between the Israel-US combined with Iran. But imagine if the other Gulf countries step in, then it would turn into a real regional conflict. And with the other world actors, namely China and Russia, not wanting to jump in, then that doesn't augur well for the Iranian regime, the Iranian nation per se. Mark.
Ambassador Sajjan, what are the risks of a multi-front war developing? I mean, we are seeing that Hezbollah is attacking Israel, and of course Israel is participating for a long period of time with in conflicts in this region. But we've seen that Europe has taken a backseat. I mean, they're not intending to support either side in these kind of conflicts, not even supporting the US to that extent. To what, I mean, what are the chances of a multi-front war?
Yeah, first coming to Europe, Europe also feels that, the path that Iran was pursuing in terms of, trying to become a nuclear weapon state, that was not acceptable. You would recall that some time ago, it was the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, who had said that, we cannot permit Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And he had said that it's America who's doing the dirty work as far as the whole world is concerned. You would also recall that, the JCPOA that was signed in 2015, the Iranian nuclear deal or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, then that had three European countries and the United States, two members of the UN Security Council, that is UK and France, and also Germany was included. And the United States, of course, that's the Western world, and then you had Russia and China. So basically, the world does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That is why they came here. So I think while the Western countries might have been critical of Israel because of what it did in Gaza, but and they might be having the problems with the United States because of Greenland and the fissures in the transatlantic partnership. But otherwise, on the issue of Iran, on Iran becoming a nuclear weapon state, it attempts in that direction. Its desire to develop a huge arsenal of missiles with very long ranges. Its attempt to set up these places, these axis of resistance, as it calls it, Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah and units in Iraq, earlier units in Syria. I don't think any of the countries was supportive of Iran as far as this is concerned. So definitely, whatever Europe might be saying or not saying, but they would by and large be supportive. You have seen what the French president said in the UN Security Council, France said, as far as this whole conflict is concerned. In terms of its expanding, I don't think that there is a possibility, because it will stay limited to that. And I think you said it very correctly, that the capacity of these states like UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, etc., beyond the presence of the United States assets on their territory is very limited. So I think they will be happy to provide only diplomatic and moral support to the United States to continue with its actions. We really have to see what the GCC foreign ministers, what they say, and the stance that they take as far as the attacks from Iran are concerned. But Saudi Arabia has been very categorical, saying that, they even summoned the Iranian ambassador to tell him that why are you hitting out at the brethren, your Muslim brethren in the region. And it is definitely not a collateral damage, as Iran would have us believe. They have targeted, for instance, targeting Aramco is not a collateral damage. So I think these countries are all very miffed as far as Iran is concerned.
And Amrit, talking about Aramco, energy prices, of course, have taken a hit. I mean, they've shot up because of this. And we see that, most of the countries in the region are large producers. So to what extent do you think, energy prices could affect positions taken in the short run in terms of this war?
Well, energy prices could spike given
They
the
have
conflict,
spiked
given
already,
that
yes.
they have already spiked, yes, and they could, if it continues further, it could spike further. And given the fact that both the Americans and the Iranian Navy is sitting in the Strait of Hormuz, and the Iranians are clearly telling that do not pass, that no ships should pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So clearly, the energy we are already seeing the effect of this on energy prices, and it could further spike. Though the OPEC plus countries have said that they could increase production, but it's not just a matter of production. It is a question of how will energy pass. And second, markets, as you know, work on speculation, work on the anxiety, capitalize on the anxiety that people have. So if this drags on for a very long time, that does not augur well for energy prices. Not just energy prices, markets would tumble. It would affect the global supply chains. Already the world economy, which is reeling under the pressure of the European war, cannot afford another war. And so this would have an effect on energy prices, one, and the other supply chains as well, Mark.
Indeed, and Ambassador Sajjanhar, Israel, of course, we do realize because of the war with Hamas and now, the situation in Gaza and the Gaza peace plan and things like that have been put forward. To what extent, does Israel stand to gain from what is happening? And because at one point of time it was quite isolated in the region, it seems to have, gained a lot of legitimacy over the course of time because of the American presence to a large extent.
Yeah, number one, because of the American presence. Number two, because of the attitude and the behavior of Iran in terms of Iranian support to all these proxy groups. So, which none of the countries really, supports. As far as Israel is concerned, Mark, Iran was an existential threat for it because you would recall what Mahmoud Ahmadinejad had said, the former president. Of course, he was followed by Hassan Rouhani, who was more moderate and all. And Pezeshkian is more moderate. Before that, Raisi was not all that moderate. But even Ali Khamenei, he had also said that, we are going to remove Iran from Israel from the face of this earth, from the map of this world. So obviously it considered that Iran was an existential threat, and particularly if it was able to get these nuclear weapons, then of course it would be a huge threat. So I think if it is able to decapitate it, if it is able to significantly reduce its capacity, of course that would be, to its great advantage.
Indeed, and we'll stick to this situation of the energy, dependence that India has on some of the countries in the region, because in view of the ongoing geopolitical developments in the Middle East or West Asia, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has reviewed the supply situation of crude oil, LPG and other petroleum products with senior officials from the ministry and PSUs. And they say they are continuously monitoring the evolving situation, and all steps will be taken in order to ensure availability and affordability of major petroleum products in the country. Ambassador Sajjanhar, so India, of course, was getting a pretty decent deal from Russia and also from Iran. So to what extent do you think, this is now hit India personally?
Yeah, I think individually, India, since it is dependent to the extent of about 85 to 87% of our crude oil requirements, they are imported from outside. Also in terms of LPG and LNG, they are imported, and much of it also comes from West Asia. So the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is partially blocked, partially closed. That, of course, has a huge impact on India. I understand that the energy prices have risen up by 13% today, and they are the highest since 2023.
Right.
So obviously, as far as our bill is concerned, import bill, that will go up. Any $1 increase in the price of crude means that we have to shell out an additional $2 billion. So that is definitely a cause for worry. And if energy becomes expensive, then of course, India's march forward as far as its GDP growth is concerned, that also comes under a big question mark. So this we'll have to see. You are right. We were getting a decent deal from Russia. But of course, the discounts that we were getting at one time, it was pretty significant in the range of about $25, $30 per barrel. This has started coming down to about $5 to $6 a barrel. But, India, two aspects I would like to mention here. India imports its crude from 41 countries. So I think whether they are countries in Africa, whether it's Nigeria, whether it is Ghana, whether it is some of the other countries, or those which are sorry, beyond the Strait of Hormuz, I think we still have those possibilities happening. We are able to import oil from there. Second is, the Indian government said yesterday morning that we have oil to the extent of 73 days strategic oil reserve.
Sure.
To meet our requirements for 73 days. So I think if this does not extend beyond a couple of weeks, I think we should still be able to shore it. But then, the markets are based on sentiment. And sentiment could get, adverse, that energy is not, being available. And also that supply chains in terms of our exports to that market. Because let's not forget, United Arab Emirates is the second largest destination for our exports. United Arab Emirates is the third biggest trading partner of India. Saudi Arabia is the fourth largest trading partner of India. So, if Strait of Hormuz gets closed, our access to those markets, both incoming and outgoing, that get affected, then that will have a serious, could have a serious impact. And India is, I'm sure, thinking about it and needs to take corrective measures.
Indeed, Amrit, that's what we started talking about the Indian community and the Gulf countries. But we know that Gulf capitals are being hit, and Pete Hegseth called those acts of terrorism. But, what sort of defense measures do you think are in place? That was what the question I was trying to evolve, by saying that Indians live there in large quantities. So, how do they participate in this? But what kind of defensive measures are in place? Because Ambassador Sajjanar said that they don't really have much beyond the US bases present there.
If as the Gulf cities are being attacked and there is a sizable Indian diaspora living there, it's a matter of concern for India. But beyond that, the Indian community there has to follow what the local authorities tell them to go into bunkers, go into shelters, go into underground parking lots, etc., and save themselves if missiles and drones are raining there. Beyond that, there's not much they can do.
Right.
Obviously, there was the Indian establishment would have taken stock of the evolving situation. The Prime Minister called the CCS, or the Cabinet Committee on Security, late last night, and they would have taken stock on the evolving situation, that if it comes to a situation where the Indians need to be evacuated from there, so that's why they're closely monitoring the situation. Right now, it doesn't merit mass evacuation, but in the past, India has done that in conflict zones. India has done that in Iraq. India has done that from Ukraine.
Right.
India has done that of its citizens from other places where conflict rages. So the CCS would have taken stock of that. They would be closely monitoring the situation. Our embassies, the phones would be ringing, talking, getting an assessment of how far the situation evolves. If it gets into a full-blown regional conflict, then I guess there would be plans, evacuation plans ready that both the Ministry of External Affairs and the Defense Ministry would have put in place. But right now, for the missiles or the drones that are hitting the civilian areas, the advisories have been put out to follow what the local authorities are doing, and the measures that I told you are the ones that generally are taken in conflict zones. When sirens sound, you don't move out in the open. Streets get you vacate the streets. You get inside buildings. You go to underground places, whatever it is, parking lots, etc., or the underground rooms in your apartments or buildings where you're living. So that's what the Indian population, along with the local population, can follow in times of conflict and when such situation evolves.
True. Ambassador Sajjanar, India is deeply invested in this region. I mean, right up to Iran with Chabahar. But even in Afghanistan, India had put in a lot of money. And now, of course, Pakistan and Afghanistan are in some sort of a conflict. So to what extent, is all this affecting us? Because at the end of the day, India is a peaceful power, but, the entire neighborhood seems to be burning.
No, you're very right. I think we are a peaceful power, we are stable, but we have been nimble-footed as far as our diplomacy is concerned. I think everyone knows how well we have been able to reach out to the countries in West Asia. I think one measure of that is in terms of the number of times the Prime Minister has traveled to these countries, I think 7 or 8 times to the United Arab Emirates, while before 2015, that was his first visit to the UAE. Before that, for 34 years, the last prime ministerial visit had taken place to that country, because these countries always used to see India through the prism of Pakistan, through the prism of Islam. But now they have, whether it is in terms of strategic partnership, counterterrorism, energy security, economic relationship. So that has become much more critical and crucial. So this region is important, and we continue to nurture this region very well. So, the Prime Minister had gone to Israel. That's an important partnership. But even here, meaning he spoke today to the King of Bahrain, also to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS. Yesterday, he had spoken to the President of United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. And so we are reaching out. Our External Affairs Minister has spoken to a large number of foreign ministers in terms of providing safety and security to our people, to the 9.4 million people who are in that region. And of course, we've spoken about, in terms of our energy security, our connectivity, our trade in that region, our exports, our investments into that region, remittances from that region. So that they are very important. And as you said very rightly, Iran also, the international North-South transport corridor, as far as Chabahar is concerned. So we are nurturing all these relationships because Dr. Jaishankar had spoken on the 28th, you would recall, Mark, and your listeners, viewers would recall, when the war fighting broke out, that he spoke to the Foreign Minister Gideon Sar of Israel in the morning and of Iran, Mr. Arakchi, in the evening, basically to ensure that our relations with both of them and with the region as a whole, they stay sturdy and on very solid footing.
Indeed. Amrit, so India's relationship with this region is largely economic as well because of the large diaspora connect, and they send home a lot of remittances here, but the investments are growing, trade is growing, business potential is also growing. And similarly, Pakistan too has investments in this region, or at least dependencies in this region. And they are also, in this situation with Afghanistan. So to what extent, is Pakistan looking at this situation because of its war with Afghanistan currently as an opportunity?
Well, Pakistan is in a bind, Mark. Pakistan has an ongoing, conflict with Afghanistan. Pakistan was supported by Iran, so they've issued, Shahbaz Sharif has issued statements in support of Iran, condemning the Israeli and the American attack on Iran. But he's also, spoken to leaders of the Sunni world because they are big financiers of Pakistan. Saudi Arabia is an ally of Pakistan. They've recently had a defense pact to deal with the Houthis. So Pakistan is also has, and Pakistan is not just economically, but it's also in some ways politically dependent upon these countries, especially Saudi Arabia. So Pakistan is also, in a way playing both sides, and given when it has the trouble with Afghanistan on its hands, so it wants support from both sides. But here, beyond that, Pakistan doesn't have much of a role to play. It is in the interest of everybody, including Pakistan, that the situation gets de-escalated and doesn't spiral out of control. Because its economic lines depend more than us. Their economy depends on the Saudis.
Absolutely. So they need more than they need the investments coming in from there. But Amrit, people look as to what is happening in Iran, and of course the US has stated it very clearly. Regime change is also the objective. So I mean, people want to know what is the this regime change. Who are the candidates? I mean, in the public domain, what's being talked about? The former Shah's son isn't very popular back home. So, I mean, what do you think? I mean, what is after all, we did talk about voices. I was asking Ambassador Sajjanhar about that. There are voices of Iranians on the streets outside of the country who seem to be supporting the US cause, but not so many voices from within.
There is, as Ambassador was saying, there is dissatisfaction in the people, in the Iranian people inside Iran too. The regime isn't popular. Ali Khamenei wasn't a very popular leader, though it doesn't matter to them because they run a sort of dictatorship there, and the candidates are vetted by the Guardian Council. So it isn't really a democracy in the sense that we understand, though they conduct elections, etc. But it's not the kind of democracy that we understand. So there is dissatisfaction, there is resentment, but in the wake of the Americans coming and killing the supreme leader, and in the way they did, and in the month of Ramzan, remember, this is a Shia-dominated country. They've made a martyr out of him. The Iranians have called him a martyr and said that he achieved martyrdom on the 10th day of Ramzan. And in the Shia community, martyrdom is a very sacred concept. They believe that if you are martyred in the holy month for a holy cause, then you descend to another life, and then you're very close to Allah and you're very pious. So he's achieved that kind of position. So the Americans have not done the Iranian people a service by killing Khamenei in that sense. Okay, for the regime change, no matter what the Americans say, no matter what the Israelis say, for regime change, they will have to wipe out the entire political, clerical, and military leadership. Today, Pete Hegseth, like before Donald Trump, has tried to incite the Iranian people, asking them to take advantage of the position, which I don't think will cut much ice with the Iranians inside Iran. No matter the diaspora may say what they say, no matter what the Shah's son may say, but they're punching above their weight. They don't matter much in Iran. He's tried to incite the army, saying the security forces should choose wisely. That's not going to cut ice with the IRGC, because it's a theocratic state, and they're not just doing a job. So they'll have to, if the Americans really want to affect a regime change, they'll have to wipe out the entire clerical leadership, the top military leadership, IRGC's leadership. Only then can they have an effect. The Assembly of Experts will put another cleric head. The regime stays, the ecosystem stays, Mark.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Amritpal Singh and Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, who was with us through this program, but we lost his connection towards the end. Thank you very much for breaking that down for us, putting it into context. War clouds over West Asia. We were talking about the epic fury, which is the ongoing operation that the United States has mounted on Iran. Thanks for watching. Namaskar, and do continue to stay tuned to DD India.